Viewers, the foremost question being posed by the Indian public is why US President Donald Trump has decided to go after India, especially since he has a great relationship with Prime Minister Modi. What is Trump's game plan? There are, of course, other questions that are engaging seasoned watchers of diplomacy and global affairs, like, will Donald Trump back off? Or is this a one-off Trump tantrum, or a sign the US now sees trade as a weapon in geopolitics, meant to even be used against allies? Is this standoff going to impact the Indo-US relationship? Let's talk to Fareed Zakaria, an Indian-born American journalist, political commentator, author of great renown, and he is the host of CNN's Fareed Zakaria GPS. Thank you very much, Mr. Zakaria, for joining us this evening. Now, I want to get straight to the question that's topmost, as I said in my introduction, on every Indian's mind. Trump says this is about India's Russian oil purchases that endanger US national security. Or is India just a convenient punching bag when his approval ratings look to be shaky?
I think it's puzzling what Trump is doing. It is a reversal of really 25 years of American foreign policy. If you go back to the Clinton administration after the Cold War, a strategic decision was made that the United States wanted to be closer to India. That relationship was then built powerfully by the Bush administration, which, of course, paying an enormous domestic price, decided to offer India the nuclear deal. Manmohan Singh worked on his end, it was difficult from the Indian point of view, but managed to do it as well. Since then, every American administration has tried to make India ties with India even stronger, and it has been bipartisan. So what Trump is doing is really reversing 25 years of bipartisan American foreign policy that saw a new strategic alliance with India as in the United States' vital national interest, both geopolitically and geoeconomically, to create diversity from China, lessen the dependence on China, develop a strong democratic ally at the heart of Asia. So then the question becomes, why did he do this? I think, honestly, everyone is puzzled in Washington. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Yes, Trump has a protectionist worldview that does view trade as a weapon, but the U.S.-Indian trade is not very great. India doesn't. This would be a very, very small, matter. It would not affect the U.S. much. It's very different from China. And of course, the excuse for the highly punitive tariffs, the India's buying of oil, of Russian oil, makes no sense because China buys more oil than India does. Now, they say China does have 50% tariffs already, but the whole thing doesn't make sense for this very simple reason, Rahul. If India and China didn't buy Russian oil, oil would be $150 a barrel, because you would have taken all that supply off the market. It would cause a recession in the Western world. It would cause a recession in America. And Trump surely doesn't want to do that. So rather than working with India to try to find ways to lessen those purchases, or more importantly, and this was the Biden administration approach, which I think is more intelligent, get the Russians to discount this oil even further through price caps and such. Then you end up with, a steady supply of oil for the world, but you don't end up with massive Russian revenues to Putin. So the whole thing is puzzling. We can talk more about the reasons, but I first wanted to mark just what a dramatic shift in American foreign policy this is. In my opinion, a very negative one. Donald Trump has basically taken 25 years of bipartisan foreign policy that saw India as an ally and tried to build relations with it, and thrown it out the window for reasons of either personal pique or some kind of personal interest of his that we are unsure about.
No, I
But what
actually,
we do know is it's very negative.
it would be great if we explore that latter point that you're making, personal interests. Now, let's scratch this itch a little bit more. Could this be a favor to his campaign donors in the United States? Remember, he's targeting India for purchasing Russian oil. We know that energy companies, big energy companies, have bankrolled, so to speak, the campaign, the Trump campaign. Is this now them sort of saying, hey, give us access to the Indian market, get the Russians out of the way? I'm just looking at some scenarios.
So there may be something like that going on. You never know with Trump because it often is highly personalistic. We're dealing with somebody. It's almost like dealing with the dictator of a third world country, where the personal interests, the personal aggravations make a huge difference. Look at the 50% tariffs on Brazil, which are largely because the guy he likes, Bolsonaro, is being tried in a Brazilian court. Now, the President Lula can't do anything about that because Brazil does actually have independent courts that are quite effective. So there's something like that. But let me lay out another scenario which ties in with Pakistan. It is extraordinarily unusual for the President of the United States to grant a military dictator, the head of the Pakistani army, who's effectively a military dictator, a 2-hour meeting in the Oval Office. I cannot recall a previous occasion where that has happened. It happened with Musharraf, but remember, Musharraf was formerly the president of Pakistan. This man is not. The president doesn't normally meet with the head of the army of any country in the Oval Office. This guy got a 2-hour meeting. Pakistan is at only 19% tariffs. And it is reported that there is a crypto venture that the Trump family has with a Pakistani group. So is that part of it? Is, as you say, part of it the energy issue that you raised, which is also a possibility? It's possible that also agricultural interests have the point is it makes no rational, logical sense because India is too small. The amount of exports you're talking about are tiny. China buys more oil from Russia than India does. And if both of them were to stop, oil would go up to $150 a barrel. So the problem here is we've eliminated all rational explanations. And so one is left with some personal pique, aggravation, or interest.
I think you're right about that, and many people have written about this, of course. But I want to press on because, you mentioned the fact that China, of course, does the maximum purchasing. Even the EU does. EU purchases gas, LNG, PNG, all of that. We know the figures. So why has India been singled out? You could have made that larger point even if you were making an ideological point to your base by getting the EU a penalty. So this is remarkably exceptionalist on his part.
Well, and it's worth pointing out, and it's important that your viewers know this, that it wouldn't really work politically in general. India bashing doesn't work in the United States anymore. The general perception of India in America is very favorable. If you look at polling, Americans don't care a lot about the rest of the world, but to the extent they do, India ranks very favorably. Yes, there are some places where there are some concerns, and if you bring up the issue of H-1B visas or specific things like that, you can find pockets of skepticism or resistance. But in general, Americans think of India as a fellow democracy, as an ally, as a country that is also has problems with China. There's an enormous amount of connection between India and the United States, partly because of the Indian diaspora in America, partly because trade has been increasing mightily in recent years. So it's not clear to me that it would be a political winner for Trump. I don't think it's a political loser, but it's sort of neutral. So again, that's why you come back to this very strange decision on Donald Trump to single India out in this way. There are very few countries that have been singled out as much as India. There's Brazil, as we talked about. There's China. There's India. And the United States has built its geopolitical strategy in Asia to counter China around India.
Yes.
The whole point of the Quad was to bring India in as a major counterweight to China. So what he's doing now by putting India in this small group of countries whom he has, targeted for particular punishment, is he's wrecking the entire U.S. Asia strategy, such as it is.
Yes, that's right. Let's talk about that, because what does this mean for Indo-US relations? For 25 years, we've called India and the US natural allies. That was a phrase that first found its way into the bilateral agreements under Atal Bihari Vajpayee. And since then, of course, we've shared a strategic partnership. We've improved upon the vocabulary there. Could this mark the beginning of a serious rift? I can tell you that the Prime Minister here is very upset.
It could mark the beginning of a serious rift. It certainly means there will be a much more troubled relationship. And I think as I say, it's extremely unfortunate. It is entirely puzzling why Trump is doing this. It's a massive reversal of bipartisan foreign policy. It is worth pointing out, though, that it's a cautionary tale for Prime Minister Modi and for some of his supporters. Many of them overlooked a lot of the frankly bizarre behavior of Donald Trump, the thuggish behavior of Donald Trump, the personalistic behavior of Donald Trump, the illiberal behavior of Donald Trump, because their attitude was, well, he likes India and he likes Modi. Well, the truth is, when you have an unpredictable, erratic, quasi-authoritarian figure in the White House, one day he likes you and one day he doesn't like you.
True.
That is how that type of personality and that type of leader works. And I think Prime Minister Modi placed far too much emphasis on his basic personal relationship with with Trump. Perhaps didn't develop the relationship strongly enough. There are some reports that that Trump wanted to have a phone call with him and Modi didn't respond as quickly and as readily as he should have. If you're going to play that game that Modi seemed to be playing, well, learn from Keir Starmer. Be slavishly available and pro-Trump and massage his ego. So you can't have it both ways. You can't rest your strategy entirely on a kind of personal relationship with Trump and then ignore the personal relationship. I think it would be much more sensible to have had a stronger, government-to-government relationship at every level. And then you have the entire government of the United States invested in it. That meant the Pentagon by weaning yourself off some of Russia's defense sales. That meant the State Department. That meant commerce, all of it. But instead, the whole thing was placed entirely on the idea that, well, Trump likes India and he likes Modi. Well, he likes India and Modi until he doesn't. That's how Donald Trump works.
Well, of course, India does have very firm red lines. We've never really opened up our agricultural sector. There are certain things, of course, which are touch-me-nots. But let's just look a little further. The Prime Minister is now going to go and attend the SCO. First time he's actually going to travel to China in about 8 years. Do you believe that this is going to alter the balance of power in the Indo-Pacific, this entire spat now with Trump?
Look, there are deep structural reasons why India is suspicious of the rise of China. China is both very large and is shifting the balance of power in the world, but particularly in Asia. But China has also had a very shall we say, unfriendly attitude towards India. China has resolved almost all the border disputes it has with its neighbors, with the one exception of India, and has initiated hostilities there. So this is not a small matter for India. India, for its own reasons, I think is going to be wary of a very close relationship with China. But I think on the other side, will it mean that the increasingly cozy relationship India and the United States had will be put on hold for a while? Yes, I do. I do think that's likely. And I think it means that India perhaps will come to the decision that while it has geostrategic rivalries with China, economically they can do more business together. That would be good for India in any event. So I think there will be changes as a result of all this, because I also think, and you asked this in your introduction, I don't think Trump will back down very easily on this. Unlike many of the cases which people looked at where Trump did back down, India is irrelevant to the United States economically. You know, the places that Trump backed down, initially Europe and China, were places of great import to the United States. The U.S. does huge amounts of business with Europe and China. The U.S. does very little business with India. It's easy for it to forego that business. So I worry that Trump will stand firm. Modi will stand firm because he's also a proud man. And this relationship will deteriorate, which will be bad for both Americans and Indians. So because the two leaders have wound themselves up,
Right.
What you're going to end up is, the people of the two countries will suffer from, what was going to be a much, much closer, warmer relationship.
Well, we leave it at this. Mr. Zakaria, thank you very much for speaking to us. The Prime Minister heads, as you know, viewers, in about 20 days to China. We'll pick up this conversation with Fareed Zakaria in about 20 days. That will be a good time to get an interesting view, because I believe that BRICS and SCO will never complement India's relationship, will only complement India's relationship, but will never supplant the relationship with the United States. And let's just hope that that is what happens as time elapses. Thank you very much.